when I see people with zero newsroom experience working in media relations, to be very candid, they're usually not as good as somebody else who has significant newsroom experience because they've walked a mile in those shoes. They understand the expectation. They understand what's a good story. They understand the pressure that is on to get clicks and views and viewership and audience share in the marketplace.
Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd.
Hello and welcome to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. Today, I'm joined by Tiffany Anthony. Tiffany is a friend of mine that I've known for a long time. Our relationship dates back to when she was in journalism, working in TV news, and I was a public relations professional, sending her what I hope was good story ideas that she could use for her TV station she worked at the time. Tiffany is a communications and storytelling professional with 18 years of experience crafting clear, high-impact narratives across broadcast, digital, and social platforms. She's led messaging for high-stakes news and major public-facing initiatives with a focus on audience engagement, clarity, and collaborative leadership. Tiffany, welcome to On Top of PR.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I'm glad to be here too. I'm glad to get you on the show. I know we've been talking about this for a while. So we kind of have a two-part conversation queued up here. So the first part we want to talk about is my thoughts and yours on how to successfully transition from a successful career in journalism into a pivot into public relations, corporate communications, or perhaps even something else. Tiffany is currently looking for new employment opportunities as of April 23rd, 2026. And of course, at any minute, somebody could share her talent for their organization. But at the end of the day, I think this will be a helpful conversation as we're seeing layoffs in newsrooms and shifting priorities in newsrooms. And we've really been seeing that for about 20 years now. And the important part, I think, is to help our audience find their next opportunity. I'm here to help them do that. And I started out my career in journalism, studied at the Missouri School of Journalism. And while I was there, I got introduced accidentally to PR and kind of pivoted my career into public relations after working for the Fernandina Beach News Leader, the Florida Times Union, the Columbia Business Times, and some other media outlets. So Tiffany, anything else you want our audience to know about yourself before we get started?
I've worked in local news for a very long time. I worked there for over 12 years. And then I've recently worked at CNN for the past 6 years, producing content on various topics from medical to the globe, the earth, like the weather, climate change, as well as breaking news, mass shootings, international war stories. And now, I'm ready for a change and looking forward to the next step.
Awesome. Well, we're here to support you in that next step, and I'm excited for you and what's to come next. I tell people this all the time that, this didn't happen to you, it happened for you because something great is around the corner, and I'm excited for you about that. So we're going to talk about journalists transitioning into PR and communications roles. And I'll just start by saying that, Tiffany, I think you're well positioned for this opportunity because so many times companies are looking to make what I call a splash hire, where they can say, hey, we just hired this person from CNN to join our PR staff. Isn't that a big win for us? And I do sense that is a big win. I do think that expectations need to be managed, right? In other words, like you're going to need some help, guidance, coaching, and support as you go through that process. And expectations have to be managed that, Tiffany shows a bright future and has a lot of potential. She hasn't worked in PR before, so this is going to be an adjustment for her. So we're going to need to surround her with the leadership or supervision or coaching, whether that's internal or external, to help guide her through this process. Tiffany, does that sound like a good setup for you?
Yes, exactly. I've been looking, I did a little bit of PR, tier PR, back when I lived in Jacksonville, for the American Cancer Society. Then I remember having a conversation with you about, I was thinking back then, this was over 10 years ago, of shifting into PR.
I remember.
I just ended up getting other jobs in news and I kept progressing. And so it kind of fell to the wayside. Hindsight in 2020, I'm like, man, I should have switched into PR then. But, I wouldn't have had some of the experiences that I've had in the past decade. But I did volunteer for the American Cancer Society. Like I went into their office. They said, we need help, like getting the message out about making strides against breast cancer. I was calling, all these local little newspapers, trying to get ads in there, adding it to the calendars, trying to see if places wanted to help with donations or if vendors wanted to come and set up at the race. So I did that for about 10 months. And then the final day of the race was the last time I volunteered there. I should have done more PR volunteering, but my job always ended up taking up so much of my time.
Sure. No,
Yeah.
it's an intense career for sure. And depending on the outlet and the market that you're in, you feel like and probably are on call 24/7. So it can be very intense. But no, I mean, you know what you're describing is phenomenal, because volunteering is a great way to get a foot in the door, to build a portfolio where it's lower risk for you, lower risk for the employer or the organization, right? Because they're not paying you anything and they're just grateful for the opportunity. So when I meet somebody who wants to break into this profession from somewhere else, especially if it's not something as closely tied as journalism is, then that's my first recommendation: is find a nonprofit and start helping them get experience, volunteer, and they're not going to say no unless you're just really bad at it. But at the end of the day, that gives you an opportunity to really build a name for yourself and build your portfolio and get experience. So this is the same advice I give, Tiffany, to people who graduate from with a PR or related degree. They end up in a sales role and they're making a lot of money in sales and they want to pivot. And then they're like, look, I took a sales job because I couldn't find a PR job right out of college. I'm making good money, but I really want to do PR. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, your challenge is you don't have a portfolio and you've got salary expectations that are here, and yet your experience is down here with entry-level candidates. So you're competing against entry-level candidates minus your maturity, minus your tangential experience. How do we get you quicker portfolio and show you relevant while you still can maintain your current employment? So good for you for volunteering. I think that's really important.
I have a question about that, because I don't really have a PR portfolio because I've been a journalist for 18 years, but I have a portfolio of all the stuff I've done, all these stories I've produced. I have a website. What do PR recruiters look for when journalists, because a lot of job postings say you can have journalism experience when applying to this job. They are looking for journalists.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to make my website look PR friendly. If that's, what would they be looking for? Because I do stories, I tell stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So lots to unpack there. So first of all, I would say be authentic to yourself and obviously represent your experience accurately. However, yes, I mean, you are at a distinct advantage because so many people for the last however many years have gone, when I came up in journalism, if you switch to the dark side of PR, right, it was a little bit, frowned upon, but a lot of people did it. And I would argue that many of those people become very good advisors to the clients or the organization that they work for because they have that newsroom experience. What I'm seeing now, 30 something years later, if you will, is I'm seeing people who have no newsroom experience working in PR. PR is more than just earned media and media relations, but it's an important and often highly valued feature of public relations. And so when I see people with zero newsroom experience working in media relations, to be very candid, they're usually not as good as somebody else who has significant newsroom experience because they've walked a mile in those shoes. They understand the expectation. They understand what's a good story. They understand the pressure that is on to get clicks and views and viewership and audience share in the marketplace. They also understand, and this is good for agencies, they also understand how you have to move and shift priorities in a given day. So you might be working on story A, but then story B is breaking news that's more important. And you're in the live truck or the live van closest to the scene, and you get completely reverted from a story you might have been working on all day, right? So priorities shift quickly. In agency world, we find that that's a key component, a key capability that we need in our employees, is the ability to pivot quickly, move on to the next priority, and then still be able to circle back and pick up where they left off before. Some people just can't multitask in that way. They just get really stressed out and burnt out over it. I would say highlight, the fact that you've got CNN to anchor your career off of, I think is really, really beneficial for you, especially to get a foot in the door and to have credibility and clout when you're doing interviews. But as far as, your portfolio goes, you're transitioning from what I would call a newsroom storyteller or a journalist to a corporate storyteller. And, it sounds like you're pursuing kind of both paths simultaneously. You've got this great news experience and resume that any newsroom would love to have you, but you're also saying, well, maybe it's time that I take advantage of my previous and current interest in exploring a job doing corporate storytelling. So at the end of the day, I would double down on your storytelling capabilities. I would also look, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, like the value and experience you bring to an organization and how your experience is going to help them grow their business, or either grow sales, ultimately grow their visibility to grow sales, or you're going to be able to help them get there faster or cut costs. So maybe you're more affordable, or you're able to bring a wider variety of talent and experience that they don't have to go hire two people for or something like that. So every business decision is made on the promise or opportunity to grow and expand or save money. So you just have to figure out how you can help them do that. It might be today, Tiffany, that they're outsourcing to some third party for video production, and you could come in and be the writer and the producer, perhaps, I'm just throwing this out there, of their corporate storytelling that's happening on video. Maybe you could bring that capability in-house. Maybe you could make that external relationship more, improve it and or make it more efficient. So there's lots of angles. You'll just have to listen carefully, I think, to the job descriptions that are out there and what the company is doing, and obviously pivot your skill set to it. But what I would set up the table for is to say, you're in a great position to take on a role where a company is looking for either media relations, where how the media works, how to make connections with the media, how to turn a story into being newsworthy for external newsroom, that many companies and marketing leaders just struggle to really figure out how to do. Secondly, you could also be perhaps the internal storyteller, where you're telling stories internally to the internal audiences at the organization. So if it's a big enough company, maybe they've got hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees, hundreds of thousands of employees. You become the newsroom for that organization, where you're helping to produce content that's going out to the employees to keep the internal communication going. And then in addition, like I said, you could just become the overall, just the media department for an organization, where you're overseeing the production of videos for the organization. What I think is the challenge that you might face is you've got to also kind of set the expectations, because I've seen companies make what I called earlier, like a splash hire, where they hire somebody to come in as the chief communications officer, vice president of public relations. That person hasn't worked really in public relations in a meaningful way yet. So they're not yet ready to be that trusted advisor to leadership. They're not yet ready to write the strategic plans and all of those things. Now, obviously, if you get that opportunity, don't turn it down, but make sure you position yourself as, I'm going to need some assistance to make this transition so that it's in the best interest and most sophisticated for the organization. The other thing I found, Tiffany, and then I'll get to your question, is that sometimes people struggle leaving a newsroom where they're more operating, and you won't have this experience. I want to say that because you've been in newsroom management and leadership before, and running the assignment desk and things like that. But what happens is sometimes people get into PR and they haven't taken off that journalism hat yet, and they're not yet ready to advocate on behalf of an organization, right? They just want to tell a story. And so that's something that personally the individual has to consider is, am I a storyteller or am I an advisor or am I both, right? And when I'm at that crossroads of the company wants me to tell story A, but I don't think it's very newsworthy, am I willing to not necessarily push back, because that sounds confrontational, but more guide the employer and the leader and your supervisor manager into a direction of what would be newsworthy or what might be interesting. Years ago, I was interviewing a candidate, and right about at the point of offering him the job, and he was working in news, and he said, hey, I'd like to know the clients that I'd be working with. So I sent him over a list of the clients that we would assign him to. It was a short list. And he started pushing back, saying, well, I don't want to work on that account. And I'm like, okay, why? And he goes, I don't have any interest in what they do. I said, okay. And he said, in this other account, I don't believe that product can do what they say it can do. And until I'm proved otherwise, I wouldn't want to put my name on it. And so he's like, but I like this account. And I was like, okay, well, the job is all three accounts. And if you get in a situation where there's a conflict between what you feel about or believe about in an account, we can always move things around. And I was like, but I can't bring you on just to work on one account at this moment. So this would not be a good fit. And so what I saw in that individual was a standard of, I'm only going to tell stories for companies that I fully believe in. And I think that's a good place to be. Don't get me wrong. but you're going to be asked to do assignments that maybe you're not as excited about, just like you're assigned assignments in a newsroom that you're not excited about. But I
Yes.
think what has to happen is the person has to be willing to say, I'm no longer a journalist. I'm now a corporate storyteller. I'm now a public relations advisor. And so you take that experience, you take that little bit of cynical jadedness, whatever word you want to use, and you think like a newsroom would think, and you prepare the client the way a newsroom would think, and you improve the communication and the materials and the pitch that you're working on so it stands out in the right way in the newsroom. But you have to embrace the idea that you're now an advocate for the organization and you want to believe in what it does. And if you're going to have a high standard of what you will and will not work with, then I might suggest don't go agency, go nonprofit, go corporate. And so you have one client / one employer that you're representing full time and that you believe in that cause. But I think we also know that once you get behind the curtain, not every company is perfect. Every company has warts and challenges and crisis and areas it needs to improve upon. So be prepared for that and be prepared for how to help the company address it and prepare for that should those issues ever become public. Tiffany, what was your question?
Well, when you were talking, I came with like several. But first off, I guess to start is the market right now is bananas. And there's a mass exodus of journalists leaving companies all over the world. And I was reading in an article yesterday that there's now more PR representatives in the UK than there is journalists, which is insane to me that there's more PR people than there is journalists in the UK. Like thousands and thousands of newsrooms are either closing or cutting their staff because of technology and mergers and acquisitions and stuff. And so when I'm looking at jobs, and I believe I would be a great fit for it, I don't know how to stand out compared to all the other journalists that are applying to the same job. And it seems overwhelming and daunting. And it's like, I have all these great skills. I might not know I might have never used Meltwater or one of those websites they're talking about, but I
Media
know I would
databases.
be, yeah, I would be a quick learner.
Sure you would.
You know, because like I learn new technology every day in the newsroom. They change things constantly, but it's like I will write these, cover letters addressing like their slogans from their websites, and I will, make sure I have keywords in my resume. And I feel like I'm not getting any traction, and I don't know if it's just the market is oversaturated.
Well, I've got good news and bad news. So I always like to start with the bad news. The bad news is years ago, I saw a report that for every journalist, there's 6 PR people in the United States. And my hunch is the number is probably 8 now, just based on what I'm seeing in the marketplace. And we can fact check that by going to bls.gov, and they list out, public relations and journalism jobs. And so that's where that statistic ultimately came from. At least 2, maybe 3 years ago, it was 6-1, as I recall. So that's why I think it's probably 8-1 now. So that's the bad news. The good news is that not all those, I would challenge the BLS to ask them, are all those PR people doing media relations? And I think a lot of people they hear the word public relations and they automatically assume it means one of 2 things, media relations or crisis communications. And oftentimes it's both, but there's so much more to PR, like we talked about earlier, corporate storytelling, managing social media, creating content for a website. There's just so much more. Being a corporate journalist, I think sounds like a great gig in my opinion. But to that end, that's the bad news. The good news is that demand for PR employment is forecasted to be very high in the near future. One of the big reasons for that is because generative engines are using and citing journalistic content and PR type content when they are mentioning, recommending, or citing companies. So what's happening is that people are seeing this shift that people are starting to use generative AI in their daily lives. They're using it instead of search engines. They're using it instead of asking friends and family for referrals. Instead of going to Yelp or other, review websites, they're just going to their favorite Chat GPT. They're going to Gemini or and Claude, etc. And they're just asking them these questions instead and getting a generative AI answer. Well, generative AI is like search engines, using things like the number of reviews and online comments. But what they're really prioritizing is journalistic content, analyst content, input from experts or, credible sources. So just like domain authority matters when you're getting a backlink in search and optimization, domain authority matters when you're citing a news story that might have appeared. CNN.com probably has a domain authority of, 99, 98, 97-ish. and that's going to be a significant media outlet to cite for your brand. So having someone on your team who has the ability to go get media coverage from CNN about your company, your products, your services, your experts, and your insights will be extremely valuable for the long term. I think it was Gartner just released research showing that it expects high demand for the next 5 years, I believe, for public relations jobs and public relations employment. And we're seeing that at Axia today. You know, we just finished our best quarter in company history. So in 25 years, we haven't had this good of a quarter, in our company history. Now, some of that's a perfect storm of new clients signing and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think PR has a very bright future. So now is a good time to pivot into it. I think demand for jobs will continue to increase. And so I would say your ability to understand this research that's being conducted about AI citations coming from journalism and what type of journalism will be extremely helpful. Tiffany, I was on a plane recently, and sitting next to me was a journalist at a top tier media outlet that we would all know. And I was kind of watching his behavior and seeing what he was working on. I don't know if I should have done that, but that's what I was doing. And and I noticed how much he was going to Reddit for his sourcing, for his story angles, for doing research on the topic that he was writing on. In fact, I don't think I saw him doing any writing at all. He was taking notes on what he was seeing on Reddit for inspiration for the angles and questions and background for the interview that he was preparing for. I bring that up to ask you as a journalist, did you use Reddit? Do you have your reporters assigned to use Reddit as a source, at least for background?
Never used Reddit necessarily for a story. I've used it for like personal opinions on things. Like if I have questions to see how people are reacting to something, I'll go to Reddit. But at CNN, I didn't personally use Reddit when writing scripts. I can't speak for all the reporters if they did or did not. I used more credible sourcing. At CNN, we were very particular. If it was, especially as like a sensitive topic, we would have to go through like legal fact checking standards just to make sure we're not going to put anything out there that's false or, could get us sued or something. So I at CNN did not use Reddit as a source per se. I would sometimes use it to see what people were talking about.
That's what he was using it for, to be clear.
Yeah.
I mean, he was looking for what topics are people talking about, asking about, wanting to know that he could then go get the answers for.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great source to see how people are discussing things with each other. And I think people are pretty real on it in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a lot of like bad things also
sure, of course. Yeah.
But I think social media is a great way to see how people are reacting to things, because a lot of people will say things on social media online that they won't say in person.
Right.
So you can kind of get more of their true self sometimes on social media.
Sure.
Like they're like, oh, this person really isn't that good of a person because of the way they talk. So it's like, but I will only use social media like in stories if it was like a public figure, usually.
Okay.
Like our president, for example, he likes to write a lot on social media. And so when I was producing stories, we would pull exactly what he said. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be misinterpreted. This is what he said. This is his 140 characters.
It could be confusing still regardless, but yes.
Yeah.
All right. So what next question do you have for me, Tiffany?
I guess we were talking about splash hires. What I'm seeing, I've been reading a lot of job postings the past several weeks. And some of these corporate jobs they want one person to do like everything.
Yes.
Like they want them to write, produce, shoot, edit, public relations, internal communications, external communications, media relations. And I'm like, do they really expect one person to be able to achieve all of that successfully? And it's not that I'm afraid of it. Like some of these jobs I would gladly have. I don't know if that's like a new trend because of cost saving or what exactly they're expecting.
Yeah, I would say I don't think it's a new in any way. I don't think it's a trend. I do think it's a misunderstanding, right? And you've been in newsrooms long enough where reporters sent out and expected to be the camera person and the journalist and the sound and audio and all that stuff, produce their own social media content and do their own online version of the same story and all that. So there's some of that already happening in newsrooms. Where I see this happening really poorly or to the detriment is social media. So they're looking to hire a social media employee who's going to be able to do it all, right? Create graphics, edit video, be a storyteller, be engaging with audiences, and all this audio visual and capability. And at the end of the day, that's not one person, that's a department. And so it's not unusual for an organization, a newsroom or corporation or nonprofit to hire one person and expect them to be a jack of many trades. And that's just unfortunate. So again, you as the candidate will have to set some form of expectations of, hey, I can do half of this. I can do 80% of this really. I can do 80% of this okay. I can do half of this or a quarter of this excellent, but here are the resources I would need to be able to meet your expectations. And that's just the reality check, unfortunately. But I think social media is the victim of this more so than anything. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's one of the, I mean, I don't want this to be a plug, but when I talk to companies about the benefit of hiring a PR firm is you get a team who can represent and bring experts, a bench of experts to the table as needed on an ongoing or short-term basis. And so I'll just mention this because maybe it's relevant, but research shows the bigger the internal PR department is, the more likely they are to hire multiple external agencies to support them. And you would think it'd be the other way around. The smaller the PR team is internally, the more they would depend on external PR agencies. But I find it's the opposite there too, that, you know, the smaller the PR team is, the less likely they will outsource. I think part of it is just realizing the power of PR, leveraging it and putting the right investment behind it. Good for you for being aware of that and noticing that right away. But yeah, I mean, I think that's true in almost any company, depending on what they value and what their expertise is. But that's something to look out for and set those expectations early so that it can be understood. And Tiffany, another example might be that, you know, a company might be looking for someone with your experience. And the question becomes, is that person primarily on camera talent, or are they writing the stories, or are they doing the video production? Right. And so those are three different roles clearly. And, you know, somebody who's good on camera might also be a good writer, but they may not necessarily be a good, video editor. You just have to work with the resources that they're giving you.
Yes. I have a question. Do PR corporations or corporate communications, do they care about certificates? Like, I'm starting to take classes online about PR, about media relations, where I'm going to try to get a certificate. Does that really matter when applying to jobs, or are they just going to look more at your like personal experience?
I think it's great that you're investing in yourself and getting the volunteer certifications and accreditations that you can pursue. I think that's fabulous. To me, I would highlight that during your interview and on your resume, showing that while I've got X number of years or decades of experience in newsrooms, I've also been a self-starter, right? Taking the initiative to learn and earn certain certifications or certificates or training. I think that's valuable. That's something I look for. One of our fifth core value is improvement. We want to see our team getting 1% better every day. We want to encourage our team on a quarterly basis to be enrolling in a class, going to a workshop, getting a certification of some sort. So I think by you taking the initiative, that's great. It's going to help you speak better when you're doing an interview. It's going to help you be better prepared for that job. But I always tell people, if you don't tell them, you won't sell them, right? So you've got to highlight that yourself and point that out and build a story around that and tell them, while I haven't worked in PR, I've been pursuing these additional certifications and learning opportunities. And by the way, you mentioned like Muckrack and Meltwater and all that. These contact database software or platforms are easy to learn. Like you said, anybody can learn them. It doesn't take much experience. Probably, honestly, the person hiring you, I'm going to guess 9 times out of 10 doesn't know how to use them themselves, right? But at the end of the day, you've used tools like that in a newsroom environment, right? And, the Associated Press has a platform where you can look up experts within the Associated Press software for sources for stories that you're working on. So it's just the opposite of that, right? The other thing is, I guarantee you have an entry in Muckrack right now that you could log into and edit. And basically that same profile or record of you as a journalist inside Muckrack is the same exact record that you would be looking up for other journalists. So you can claim your profile on muckrack.com and then go in and make edits to it. And those same edits you're making there of your Muckrack profile will be the same content you'll be pulling media lists from, looking to see what a particular journalist, covers or doesn't cover.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I definitely have a page and I've looked at it and I'm like, that's like a quarter of what I've done.
Yeah.
Because I've done like 800 plus stories at CNN. It's like, I mean, we don't always get a byline as a producer. So it's like a lot of it's not connected back to me. It's usually the reporter or the anchor that gets the credit, which, I'm fine with. It's like, I mean, it keeps me a little bit out of the limelight, but yeah, it's good to know that I can log in and edit that because I've definitely looked at it before.
Well, and so I was recently meeting with a large national organization that wants to hire us to be their PR firm. And in that meeting, they introduced us to a media relations manager who had a very strong public relations background. And I thought to myself, and I commented that, this individual is going to be an incredible resource to the company to kind of help them vet their story ideas based on his, decade of TV news reporting experience. And I think that's a very valuable skill set that corporations would be highly valuable having in-house. Again, not only with the media relations element, but then also helping them tell better stories using their internal media channels. So I don't know who said this first, but I've heard a lot of people say, and I've used it myself, is that, in 2026, every company is a media company, whether they want to be or not, right? You've got to be producing your own content, whether that's for an internal audience of employees and shareholders and board members and investors, or it's for external audiences like other stakeholders like the media, the public, the community, the industry, your professional colleagues, your customers, and the marketplace in general. So if you're not a media company, then you're really missing out. And in order to be a media company, you have to have content creators employed or engaged. You have to have the capabilities of producing video and other content internally. So you're going to be well positioned and others will be well positioned for those exact jobs. And if you don't get the one you're applying for this week, there's going to be another one next week. And so the opportunities are always going to be there. It's how you position yourself as a candidate the right way. And also whether or not it's a good culture fit. I mean, we've turned away business opportunities because we just didn't feel like our cultures were well aligned or they were the type of company that we wanted to be actively advocating for.
Do you have particular websites for me as well as other people going through this journey that besides LinkedIn that a lot of PR companies advertise positions on that is reliable, that is a good source? Because like, for example, like LinkedIn, I will see like a communications position posted and then I'll go to the analytics and it's like 2,000 people have applied to this. And it's like, whoa, it's like that's very overwhelming. And I didn't know if there was other websites that PR companies regularly use to find talent.
Well, welcome to my world because that's the case. Like when we advertise a job, everybody and their brother is applying. I do think that I've talked about this in other content pieces, but public relations, the irony that it has an identity crisis in itself, it just baffles me every day. So we get a lot of people who work in customer service applying for a PR job saying, I'm really good with people. We have receptionists applying for PR jobs saying, I'm really good with people. And I get it and I appreciate that, but we're looking for strategic communicators, right? And experts. And so I would say this, that when we post a job, we typically will post it to LinkedIn, very quickly get overwhelmed by candidates. We try to make it very clear where they have to check a box. Yes, I have this many years of related experience, and people will still check it and you go to look and they just don't have the experience that they certified that they did have. Unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. It's so easy for people, especially on LinkedIn, to click apply. And sometimes that's automatically done. We posted our last couple of openings on, well, first of all, we always post them first on our website, axiacareers.com. That's where we're always going to post every job because from there is how you get entered into the applicant tracking system. I know you wanted to talk about that for a minute. And then if we want to go beyond that, first of all, I love word of mouth. I love sending an email to Tiffany saying, Tiffany, we're hiring for X. And if you know anybody, please send them to Y, send them to axiacareers.com. That's also kind of a passive way for me to let Tiffany know that, in case I'm emailing at her work address that, hey, we've got this opening and maybe you're interested, right? So, or things like that. But at the end of the day, I want my trusted network to be sending me people that they know, like, and trust and recommend, as opposed to just random people applying for a job. So I've had some hires that I've made based on that didn't work out, but most of them do work out. But my long story short is to say that the Public Relations Society of America has a website where we've posted jobs before. Our best candidates for one of our most recent positions all came through LinkedIn, but so did our worst candidates, right? And so the PRSA ones were lower volume, maybe slightly higher quality, but I don't think there was anybody that applied there that made our finalist list. So I think it's a little bit crazy what's out there, and I think people underestimate the difficulty it is to manage, like you said, hundreds or thousands of candidates applying all within 24 hours, right? And so what the reality is, when you apply for a job, the first stage is to weed out 80% of the candidates as quickly as possible. Right. And then the next step is, okay, how do we narrow this down to 3 or 5 that are the top candidates that we want to interview first? And some people might disagree with that approach of only narrowing it down to 3 to 5, but I would rather be in the running for a job with 3 to 5 candidates than one of 50 that they're interviewing with. And I'm wasting my time because they couldn't make a decision, of who they liked most on paper. Now, respectfully, I mean, we narrowed down our most recent leadership position to about 15 to 20 candidates. And then, we did a lot of virtual interviews, meaning we said, hey, fill out this 1-page, questionnaire. And then from that, we were able to determine who continued. So we want to keep it light and we want to move quick. We don't want to waste people's time, doing a whole bunch of interviewing and things like that. So I don't know if that's helpful to you, but I know you want to talk about adapting to ATS systems and evolving hiring practices. Applicant tracking systems have been around for 20 something years. They're getting better and smarter and more AI driven. But, yes, what you have to do is every time you apply for a position, you want to optimize your resume and your application that you complete for the keyword phrases that they're using in the job description, so that there's a good match based on what a bot sees, right? So you want to literally copy and paste a lot of the language and put it into your cover letter, put it into your application, put it into your resume. And so I've heard this for my entire career, which is now 30 years plus, is that for every job you apply for, you have to customize your resume. You have to customize your cover letter and your job application. Now you've got to do all those things and also make sure your LinkedIn looks good. And here's my hiring hack is I'd rather see your LinkedIn profile than I would your resume, because I trust a little bit more about your LinkedIn profile because at least it's public. And so your coworkers could be like, I can't believe Jason said he worked on that. He didn't touch that. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of element of hopefully more accuracy. Also, the format is consistent, right? So I know what I'm going to see when I go to a LinkedIn profile. I can scan it quickly, look for what I want to look for, and make a quick decision as to whether or not I want to continue the conversation with that individual or not. So those are just some thoughts that I have on the ATS. And if you're not using generative AI to help you improve and tighten up your resume a little bit, I think you're missing a great opportunity. People ask me to look at their resumes all the time, and I enjoy doing that. Fun fact, I did that as a college student in the Career Center at the Missouri School of Journalism, and I got really good at it. And one of the things I've told people for that my entire career is, for every bullet point on your resume, make it measurable. So don't just say I managed a department, but I managed a department of 5, 10, 50, whatever it might be, right? Don't just say I increased sales or media impressions or whatever it might be. Tell me by percentage. It was this when I started. It was that when I finished. It was this number when I started. It was this when I finished. So establish the baseline and show how you improved it. When I look at journalists' resumes, they say I wrote stories daily or weekly or monthly. Well, how many, and what was your timeline? What was your topic? So I would just try to make everything measurable. So again, you can show the company how you're going to help them make money or save money and how you're going to have an impact on the organization. What other questions do you have?
You mentioned earlier that a lot of times when people are applying, like Easy Apply, you'll ask like, how many years do you have in public relations? How many years do you have in media relations? I feel stuck sometimes on those questions because the job that I do working in newsrooms, I do media relations. I do some public relations, and so it's like, I'm like, technically, yes, I've never worked for a PR firm, but I'm doing a lot of this skill set in my current job. And I don't know how many, I'm like, how many years do I put? Because I can put 18 for media relations because I've been in journalism for 18 years. Yeah. Would they look at my resume and go, nah, or would they understand what I mean by that?
I like that. I like the way you're positioning it. So if the question is specifically how many years of media relations experience do you have, and you've been working in journalism or media for that many years, then that's what I would put down for sure. I'll tell you one thing, it might be a little provocative and contrarian, but before I would apply at an agency, I would find out from that agency, and I would look closely at the job description also. But a lot of agencies have a practice, for good or bad, they don't hire people who don't have previous agency experience. So the exception is you have to land there on an entry level role or do an internship there or have worked at an agency somewhere else. And the reason I bring that up is I'd hate for you and others to waste their time applying for a job if a agency won't even consider you because you haven't worked at an agency. The reason agencies feel this way is that they've seen how difficult it is for people who have worked for one employer to make the pivot of working for multiple clients at one time. There's just something about the DNA there that it's hard for some people to make that adjustment or that pivot. Some people just don't like it at all, period. And that's fair. They have the right to not like it and not want to do it that way. But I would tell you that, yes, you have the years of experience with media relations, probably more valuable having been, in the trenches of a newsroom as opposed to trying to do it from afar. So I think that if I were to put you like head to head, let's just say that the number is 20. So I can hire someone who's been doing media relations for 20 years or someone who's been working in a newsroom for 20 years. That person that's been working media relations for 20 years has been out of a newsroom in theory for 20 years, right? And has the newsroom changed since the day you first entered it?
Dramatically.
Yeah.
Like every year.
Traumatically might be a word too, right? Traumatically changed.
Like every year in the business, I feel like my job description changes.
Yeah.
It's
not getting easier, is it?
No, it's just more and more tools we have to learn.
Yes.
You would think technology makes things easier, but I don't think it does. I think it always adds an extra level. Like I started out when we were doing tape to tape, and now now we're using AI in some forms, and it's like you always have to learn to adapt and evolve. And in the newsroom, and I would say I get a lot of PR pitches and a lot of them aren't great. So,
they're terrible. They're terrible. Yeah. No, there's two things wrong with them always. It's either sent to you and you're not the right person, or two, it's sent in a way that it's like, what's the story here? I don't see the story, or this wouldn't interest my audience, right? That comes down to that.
It's also, I feel like it's some PR agencies or PR people not doing their homework. Like when I was at CNN, I wasn't a booker. Like there's particular people that at CNN that book all the segments and interviews. They're the bookers. And I'm like, yes, I could pitch this, like maybe to CNN digital. Like, there's like National Geographic would send some amazing video, and I did some of their stuff, for digital, but they would send the video already with all the information. So, and like I could call and interview the scientist that did the research for the piece, but it wasn't like I had to put it all together from scratch,
Yeah.
But
the best media pitches are ones that are stories that are already done for you, right? Is what I say. Yeah.
I mean, it's a quick way to make sure your stuff gets on, if you send great video to a news organization, like it's going to pique their interest,
Well, Tiffany, we're running out of time for this episode, but as we talked about, you're committed to coming back and doing another episode with us that you can share more of your thoughts and insights and expertise as a journalist who is also an employment candidate who will help our audience understand how to better pitch newsrooms like CNN. Just want to go back for a minute, what I was saying about the two candidates lined up together, both with 20 years of experience.
Yes.
You're going to have fresh media connections and contacts, fresh understanding of what's happening in the newsroom. The other candidate's going to bring more years of advising the corporation, right? And understanding how to navigate the corporation into being confident, willing, and able to turn that into a news story, which can be a challenge, right? So in a newsroom, you're working homogeneously with a group of people who all understand what makes good news stories. When you're working corporate side, most people have no clue, including some people that work in PR, including the PR agency they've hired, right? So the challenge is like you've got to guide and lead and help those people adapt their line of thinking to, well, I mean, every Friday is Hawaiian Shirt Pizza Friday. Why would the media not want to come and cover that, right? I don't understand. We have such a good time. Everybody loves it. And it's like, yeah. Or, well, we're adding another 1,000 square feet to our lease in the building. Why would this not be newsworthy? So it's little things like that. Or the CEO's daughter might win the state championship for baton tossing. And these are all real stories that I've dealt where clients are telling me how newsworthy this is. Or, hey, we gave away a remodel. We remodeled the bedroom of this deserving family in Dallas, Texas that, won our contest. Why isn't this going to be on Good Morning America? And I'm like, because it's not about you doing the remodel. It's about the person receiving the remodel and how interesting is their story. And by the way, they may just tell their story and not even mention your garage or your room that you remodeled at all. And you have to be okay with that. So there's things like that no one is telling them, or no one is willing to speak up and tell them. And, in order to be a trusted expert advisor, you've got to be there with the good news, the bad news, and the solution. And so, as I mentioned earlier, when you have a journalist who wants to work in PR, but's not willing to work around to find the solution, I think we both agree every company has a story to tell. Every company has something interesting going on within it. You need someone who's willing to, hit the streets or hit the office and walk the halls to find that story, and then pivot that story into what the company thinks is newsworthy and interesting, into what the audience of the media outlet thinks is interesting. So, Tiffany, let's come back and talk more about this.
Yeah, definitely. And the end on that, I think a lot of companies need to realize that some of the best stories are about people and interesting people. And it's not just about a product. Like, people want they want to connect emotionally with stories. And 100%. I think a lot of companies they forget that. And they lose sight of that.
They forget that, or they don't want to deal with that because they don't see where that is going to help them sell something instantly, or that's going to create a vulnerability or exposure to a person within their organization that they may not want to be in front of the cameras or doing interviews. There's a lot of reasons why they don't do it, but you're exactly right. Like, if you think of a movie you went to go see about a company, like the Apple, the Steve Jobs movie, the Facebook movie, and all these things, none of them are about the company. They're about the characters and people within the company that made it all work.
Yes.
And so if we went to go see a movie about a company and their corporate tax filings, their articles of incorporation, their leases and their contracts, right, we'd fall asleep immediately and not be interested in it. So that's what I tell people, our clients, all the time, is you have to think of it like it's a movie or a TV show. What's going to get someone interested and what's going to get them to stick with it? And it's not just the company did this or the company did that. It was how the founder, the engineer, persevered despite the difficulty to make something great happen.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. All right. So this is part 1 of part 2. We'll get part 2 scheduled and live in the near term. Tiffany, this was great. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And hopefully you learned something and it was helpful to you and our audience as well. And speaking of our audience, I want to say thank you for tuning in to On Top of PR. It's my goal to help you stay on top of PR. If you found this episode beneficial and helpful, do me a favor, please take a moment to share it with a friend or colleague who would benefit from it. And stand by for our next episode with Tiffany, where we're going to talk more about her insights working in newsrooms and how that will help you stay on top of PR. Be well.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.